Something that annoys me in all films is the fact that they randomly, there's a scene in a few scenes in Lord of the Rings where a guy just stood there sharpening his sword or doing whatever he's doing with a helmet on. Why have you got your helmet on? You're inside the walls and you randomly got your helmet on. Why have these guys got their armor on?
Armor at the table. That's kind of another common fantasy trope where you have this idea that people who wore armor must have been in armor 24 hours a day. They were always in armor. And of course, that's just not true. What we see in historical depictions of feasts and celebrations is, especially for the upper classes, it was an excuse to wear extravagant, really fancy dress. So we see things like gowns and houppelons of silk embroidered with gold and silver thread and extravagant jewels and headwear, not people in armor all the time like we see in fantasy stuff.
Well, again, like many other things, it depends on the context. Like Ian Laspina said, it didn't really happen in the Middle Ages because noblemen, or mounted nobility in the case of knights, for example, they wouldn't really wear armor while dining for whole lots of reasons, but one of which is actually the fact that a supper is a fantastic opportunity to show off your best clothing, and that's what most of these people actually did. But is it actually possible to do it? Well, I do happen to have first-hand experience, as I went to 2 medieval dinners or suppers organized here in a restaurant in my town that sometimes does make these sort of medieval activities, and it was a fantastic opportunity for people who love the Middle Ages to actually wear costumes and stay all together. We danced, we talked, and we dined. Now, the first time I went there wearing male armor, I could do that every day. It was not a problem at all. The second time I tried some plate. Now, this is a problem. Not in terms of mobility, you can actually move. It's well articulated. The problem is that when you wear full plate armor, you become a weapon yourself. If anyone happens to bump into you, for example, or to hit you with their elbow, they're gonna hurt themselves. So you will actually need quite a lot of space around you to move, not because you can't move, but because you might hurt other people. Holy mother of Dovahkiin! Well, we do have an example of people having to partake their meal in armor. The Romans. Roman soldiers were often on the march. And while you're on the march, of course, you wear your armor. Why do you wear your armor? Because it's always much preferable to wear your armor rather than carrying it because of a matter of weight distribution on your body. Hence, when the Romans were on the march, they would have their meal while wearing armor. They would just put down perhaps the pilum or other objects that they were carrying, the scutum, for example. They would sit down, remove the helmet, if they were wearing one, because you have to imagine that if we were not in enemy territory, then most of the times the helmet would have been simply hung on your bosom like this. And then they would have their meal, mostly consisting of proteins from lard, for example, and other times they would just drink posca. Posca was basically a mixture of vinegar and water. Most likely the sort of drink that Roman soldier who actually offered the savior. A lot of people read that situation, that scene, as being an insult, but actually the way I see it, looking at it through historical eyes, he gave Jesus Christ, or Yeshua, his drink as a legionary. But I went off on a tangent. Going back to wearing armor while having dinner, absolutely Romans had to do it, and when they were in enemy territory, whatever the Romans did, whether it was building fortification, building bridges, roads, streets, felling down trees, or going on a patrol, they would always be wearing armor. Why? To always be ready for possible abrupt or sudden attacks.
I wonder. There was actually a fairly strict etiquette in regards to medieval dining. They didn't have the fork, so I would often eat with knives or even daggers, kind of cut, poke, grab or whatever and eat. And the etiquette is that you took your turn. Oftentimes the food was laid out in front of you, no individual kind of meals given on individual plates, but the food was there, and so someone would go in, cut, grab, eat, and then it would be another person's turn. I wonder what happened if someone skip the line. You know, someone's eating and while they're grabbing their food, they break protocol and someone goes in while someone else is there. Sir, it is not your turn to eat the chicken. I am clearly eating the chicken. It is my turn. But thou art taking too long. This is a travesty. I challenge thee to a duel, and because I am eating in my armor, I am ready to fight in this very instant. But I am not wearing armor. Thou shalt kill me because I am not adequately defended. Well then thou should have been wearing thine armor while eating. Shouldn't of thee.
Melee, I am aware that, it developed from very much everyone hands into a very structured sport. But in this, they're riding in a circle inside an area where they're just basically hitting each other with short wooden lances. Why do they have short wooden lances?
The tournament scene, we see these kind of short lances, and they even kind of swing them at each other at some points like clubs. Now, in historical depictions of medieval melee, what we usually see are kind of less surprising weapons, like basically swords, presumably blunted versions of steel swords, and then later specific tournament weapons like a kind of faceted club that we see during the melee. As far as lances go, normally we see full-size lances for the joust specifically.
Why are you talking about what weapons they're using in these small little tournaments? What you're really missing about this scene is the fact that it has two really fantastic actors in it. Patrick Stewart and Clive Swift. Now, I think everyone knows who Patrick Stewart is, but you're thinking, Clive Swift? Who's Clive Swift? Well, I'll tell you who Clive Swift is. He's Richard from Keeping Up Appearances, one of the all-time best British comedies.
Why is Camelot made out of tinfoil and cardboard boxes? Why?
Why is Camelot made out of tinfoil and cardboard? Well, that's easy.
It's only a model.
Wait! I'm interrupting! Sorry, Ian, but you forgot one of the most important reasons why you need cardboard and tin foil. Aliens. Clearly the producers, and director of Excalibur knew that aliens are watching them, which is why they set up their set with cardboard and tin foil. And in fact, I'm a bit confused why they're not wearing it on their heads. I mean, that's the main way you prevent aliens from, observing you. Also the government.
How realistic was it that every combat had to end in a death? Could you just yield? Because you get sort of like, in some films, you'll get the idea that, he yields and everything is okay. But in other films, in some of the treaties or treatises, it says they have to go to the death, or, the coffin is waiting for the person who fails. So is it a case of that you absolutely had to do it to the death, or did people just carry on when they'd apologised?
I don't really know about in the medieval period, but in 16th century Germany it was essential to uphold your honour. A man couldn't be seen as attempting to avoid a fight, otherwise he would lose his right to bear arms. That doesn't mean that people fought to the death over trivial matters, it just means that you had to be willing to fight. Let's say I bump into you in a bar and spill your drink, you have to be willing to fight me, and I have to be willing to fight you, and everyone else in the bar has to attempt to police the situation and go get the appropriate people to calm it down. But neither of us can look like we're willing to back away from the fight. If maybe I'm a little bit too drunk, which is likely, or you're an expert swordsman and you cut my face, or things are getting a little bit too hectic, I can back out because I've at least been willing to fight. I've upheld my honour by going that far. Again, this is 16th century Germany, so not technically medieval. Sorry!
We are pleased to report that the alien invasion mentioned in the previous episode of Medieval Mythbusters has been forestalled by wearing cardboard hats with tin foil. But Antony is still confused. Please follow the link to part 3 and see if this man can finally understand. Also, in the following episode, you will get to see Knight Squire's face before his plastic surgery. Be afraid. Be very, very afraid.